Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Renu Tyagi from Department of Anthropology, University of Delhi. Today I am going to discuss the module Socio-cultural aging under the paper Biosocial Gerontology. The learning objectives of this module are: number 1 is to learn about the concept of socio-cultural aging. Number 2 is to understand the cultural diversity and change. Number 3 is to understand the social problem of elderly. And at the last, to know the effects of social factors on the aging. First of all, let's discuss about the concept of aging. Aging is a universal phenomena and involves a progressive decline in the overall health of an individual. Generally, aging involves three dimensions, namely biological, psychological, and the social one. Or the psychology of the aging can best be viewed as both a biological and as a social science, reflecting the ways in which the individual change over time and is a function of a complex field of biological and the environmental factors. Biological age is often referred to the present age of an individual relative to the potential lifespan of an individual. Various research on the biological aging are found to be concerned with studying the process that limits the lifespan of the individual and the species. The biological age of an individual is closely related to one's chronological age, but they are not the same as they are derived from the different concept as well as different sets of the measurements. Psychological age refers to the age of an individual when combined with the other population with regard to the adaptive capacity as observed or inferred from the measurements of behavior. Psychological age may also include the subjective reactions to development, although it is related to both chronological age and the biological age. It is not fully accounted by the combination of these. Social age refers to the social conduct and the roles of the individual relative to their group or the society. An individual of a social age is related to his or her chronological, biological and psychological age, but it is not completely defined by those within different societies. There are often different and elaborate age-related status systems that lead to the expectations of how an individual should behave in relation to others. The age grading of the expected behavior have always existed in a society and is a long evolving process which is only partly determined by the biological and the social characteristics of the individual at a given age. The different aspects of the aging, that is biological, psychological and the social, enables an individual to develop or change to distinct orderly ways. However, as a result of many arbitrary events, these shifts are not uniform and vary around the average trend for the some defined population. In the early 19th century, the idea that individuals develop and age with variations around an average trend was a powerful conceptual innovation. With the dawn of the 19th century, the shift from the infectious and the parasitic disease to the non-communicable diseases led to an increase in the life expectancy of an individual. The advancement in the modern medicine was the greatest achievement which led to this shift. With the increase in the life expectancy, more people are now living longer. That is, the average life span has also increased, which has led to the increasing number of the elderly people. There are two key drivers identified for the population aging. The first is increasing life expectancy. On average, people around the world are living longer, although a small part of this global increase is due to the improved survival of the people at older ages, which is reflected by an improved survival at the younger ages. The second reason populations are aging is due to the decreased fertility rates. This is assumed to have resulted from the parents realizing their children have higher survival rates as compared to the past, increased access to the contraceptive techniques and changing gender norms, etc. Now let's discuss about the aging and the health of the elderly people. Older people contribute to the society in many ways, whether it be within their family, their local community or society as a whole. However, the social resources and the opportunities available to each individual as we age will severely be dependent on one key characteristics, that is the health. With increasing age, various underlying physiological changes occur with the risk of chronic disease rises. By the age of 60 years, the major burden of the disability and the death arise from the age-related losses in hearing, eyesight, mobility and non-communicable diseases, including the heart disease, stroke, chronic respiratory disorders, cancer and dementia, etc. Aging is frequently accompanied with a decline in both vision and the hearing, although there is the marked diversity in how this is experienced at an individual level. Age-related hearing loss is bilateral and most often marked at the higher frequencies, which results from the cochlear aging, environmental exposures such as the noise, genetic predisposition and the increasing vulnerability from the physiological stresses and modifiable lifestyle behaviors. The affective disorders such as the depression and anxiety also tend to persist throughout the life in a population where the different episodes of the affecting disorders might be expected to be more prevalent in elderly age group due to the increased risk of the adverse life events. As people age, they are more likely to experience the multi-morbidity, which can be defined as the presence of multiple chronic conditions at the same time. This can lead to the interaction among the conditions between one condition and the treatment recommendation for another condition and among the medications or the medicines prescribed for the different conditions. Cognitive functions vary greatly among the people and it is found to be closely related to the years of the education. Many cognitive functions begin to decrease at a comparative younger age with different functions decreasing at different rates. As a consequence, the functioning becomes increasingly heterogeneous with increasing age. Some deterioration in memory and the spread of the information processing is common and complaints about it are commonly reported by the elderly people. However, aging is associated with a decrease in the capacity to tackle the multifaceted task that requires the dividing or the switching different. It does not appear to reduce the capacity to maintain the concentration to avoid the distraction. Although it is often assumed that increasing longevity is being accompanied by an extended period of the good health, the evidence is that older people today are experiencing the better health than their parents is less encouraging. In fact, the burden associated with the health challenges in elderly people is generally far higher in the low and the middle income countries. As people age, they experience a gradual accumulation of the molecular and cellular damage that results in a general diseases in physiological functions. These broad physiological and homeostatic changes are largely inevitable. although their extent varies significantly among individuals at any particular chronological age. Along with these underlying changes, the exposures to a wide variety of the positive and the negative environmental influences across the life course can influence the development of the other health characteristics such as the physiological risk factors constituting of the high blood pressure, diseases, injury, and broader geriatric syndromes. Aging is a social as well as a biological process wherein the individual interact with and are influenced by the partial or social, physical, and cultural environment in which they age. Although individual knowledge may vary, there are common patterns to the aging process whereby persons born of about the same time are influenced throughout the life by the similar historical or social events. Individual age within a social structures whereby unique cultural, historical, political, economic or environmental factors impose on different age groups at different times and often in different ways depending on their stage in the life cycle. Moreover, within given age cohort, a variety of the factors like the gender, ethnicity, education, income, and social attributes influence the values and beliefs, either enabling or prevailing the opportunities to experience the leisure pursuits. These various systems of social differentiation can foster real or received inequities, thereby influencing the life chances and the lifestyle of the specific individual or particular subgroups. Given that aging is a social process, it must not be viewed as a process that is unique to later life. Rather, aging phenomena must be studied from a lifespan developmental perspective. A focus on the specific crisis events of later life illness, poverty, loneliness, institutionalized living, cognitive frailty, death of a spouse, retirement, while important, is no longer appropriate in trying to reach a full understanding of the aging process. Instead, the historical events in the larger communities and the positive and negative earlier experiences of the individuals and age cohort must be understood before initiating the research or the policy. Now let's see the cultural diversity and changes. Culture is a complex concept that symbolizes the total of human-produced various behaviors, beliefs, attitudes, symbols, knowledge, language, traditional morals, rituals, laws, art, customs, and habits that we have learned and shared by a group of the people. When cultural components are adopted, shared, and passed on from one generation to the next generation, the society emerges, and the effect of the material and the non-material aspect of a culture portrays and represents the way of life in a group. These components are not genetically transferred but rather learned, evaluated, and either adopted or discarded through social interaction and imitation. Since every society has its own unique culture, the values, practices, and the beliefs of one culture may not be appropriate or acceptable in another. In early stages of a society, the creation of the cultural components usually results in a relatively homogeneous and dominant culture with similar values, beliefs, language, and lifestyle. Cultural components from one society are diffused and may be adopted by the other societies according to their personal needs. This process of diffusion and adoption is often referred to as the globalization of the culture, which includes the sports, activity, and health promotion movements. The changing social patterns often affect the life of the elderly in a negative way. In an Indian society where there is a joint family system, the elderly family members often play the role of the babysitters, housekeepers, and occupy a respectable position in the family and have a voice in the important matters of the family. In general, the elderly people have a separate role to play and enjoy a dignified status within the family. However, the lifestyle and the social status of the elderly has changed over time. With the adoption of the nuclear family patterns, the care of the elderly people has now become a burden for many, as with the rise of the urbanization and the shortage of the accommodation, they become alienated from the mainstream of the life. In India too, the joint family system is breaking apart and people are moving into cities for better job and lifestyle, and the role played by the elderly earlier are no longer required due to the modern facilities available. As people grow older, they are no longer the bread earner of the family, and hence they lost the grip over the family members and family issues. Now let's understand the social problems. The interaction of the social and the community factors and aging are important and complex too. It is important for the health providers and the professionals to take into account the social and the cultural factors on the health and well-being of the elderly people. Although the distinction between the social and the physical effects on aging is arbitrary, it is important to distinguish the two to fully understand the effects. The physical process, which is the aging disease and disability, overlap with each other and with the social process, which is often referred to as the growing old. The transition from the adulthood to old age for many may seem as a detachment from one's societal groups, as most of the meaningful and the social roles are given up due to the inability to carry out most of the roles which demands the active participation. Therefore, many elderly people have reported to perceive themselves to remain isolated, a burden to the society, and have a feeling of the unwantedness or unworthiness. In fact, clinical depression is a common for elderly people, which could be elevated by these perceptions. This figure illustrates the social consciousness of growing old that is coupled with the aging disease and disability. Elderly face common social problems, which includes the housing problem, difficulty in transportation, and isolation. There are many factors which led to these types of the social problems more frequently among elderly people as compared to the younger generation. Some of which includes the poverty. Poverty is often defined as comparing a household's income with the level of the prices of the basic commodities necessary for the life, that is the subsistence level, and often referred to as the poverty line. Those individuals whose income is below the minimum level necessary for the subsistence are said to be living in the poverty or under the poverty. It is also often denoted by the inability to purchase the needs and services to maintain an acceptable quality of the life. Older individuals live in the poverty due to the retirement from the work and high demand of the health maintenance expenditure, particularly the expenditure rendered due to the increased health care need, disability, and dependability. There are some housing problems with the elderly also. Often older people, especially those with the disability, find difficulty in coping and adapting with their surroundings as compared to the younger adults. For some elderly, the cause of their housing problems may not be their dwelling but the environment, different cultural or the social values of the neighbor, Elderly people often have a misconception about their acceptance by the society, and the society itself has a notion of elderly as dependent, disabled, and a burden. The structural problems such as the lack of the proper toilet, bathrooms, or hot water, cost of the rent, etc. pose a great problem for them. Sometimes the dwelling also pose the unsuitable after the onset of the disability and can affect person's ability to climb stairs, access the bathroom, do the laundry, or as simple as entering the house. The smooth accessibility within the house also cause the problems when there is less space, especially for those using the wheelchair or walking aids. This can be solved by the occupational therapist by installing of ramp and the indoor elevators and addition of the handrails can dramatically increase the safety of the house. Moving into a new place is also an issue. Moving to a less dependent environment also represents as one of the hardest decisions associated with the aging for both the elderly people and the caregiver. Apartment living, old age homes or assisted living facilities are some of the housing facilities friendly for the aged. Assisted living is not always suitable for the antisocial person because the caregiver and the staff are not often trained to cope with the excessively dependent people, and for those groups, nursing homes are the best suited for their care or the needs. However, many disabled people are unable to afford such facilities or afford to have such facilities as it comes with a hefty cost. Now let's see the effect of the social factors on the aging. The effect of the social relationships on elderly people developing and coping with the disability depends not only on the strength of the relationship but also on the ability of the person to accept the relationship and their distinctive coping skills as well as their economic status and the inherent severity of the disease process. Studies on the social factors of the aging have suggested that social connections and perceived social support have an effect on the health among persons facing the crisis. Stressors or adversity, while social isolation or perceived lack of the social support was found to cause more diseases and a higher mortality rate. One study done by the Karla Mangla et al. In 2002 suggested that affordable load, that is an index of the wear and the tear on the physiological system of the body related to the heart diseases, physical functions, cognitive functions, and the death was found to be significantly modulated in men but not in women, with the strong emotional support. Various endurance and the resistance exercises can modulate the disease processes and slow the development of the frailty, disability, and the death. Exercise also enhances the cognitive functions and may slow the cerebral atrophy, but more than half of the population over 65 years and above does not involve any physical activity. Now let's see the religion and the spirituality perspective. Religion and spirituality has been recognized in the preservation of the psychological and the physical health of the elderly people by various researchers. Religion and spirituality also improves the overall psychological health with a lesser effect on the physical health, although not all forms of religions are positive. The role of the religion and the spirituality in health may be that it increases the coping skills and enhances the access to support groups and Prayer is the most commonly used coping strategy for many elderly people living with the disability or life-threatening diseases. The religion and the spiritual involvement of the elderly people should also be taken into account by the healthcare professionals to incorporate them into the holistic model of the healthcare services. Abuse of the elderly is another major problem felt by the elderly. Old age is often accompanied by some physical as well as the cognitive incapacities like poor eyesight, loss of the hearing, poor memory, etc., which lead to the dependency. The increasing tendency for the family to move out to a nuclear home, leaving their elderly aged parents, mostly because vulnerability of the elderly people. Various studies indicate that economic factors in the form of the economic dependency and inability to work due to the poor health are the main factors for the elder abuse, and those who are economically and physically dependent are at the higher risk of being abused. However, even those elderly people who have the sufficient financial support or have no physical impairment can still be a victim of the abuse and the maltreatment. Now let's summarize what we have learned in this particular module. Aging involves a progressive decline in overall health of an individual. Generally, aging involves three dimensions, namely biological, psychological, and the social. The biological age of an individual is closely related to one's chronological age, but they are not the same as they are derived from the different concepts as well as different sets of the measurements. Whereas the psychological age refers to the age of the individual when compared with the other population with regard to the adaptive capacities as observed or inferred from the measurements of the behavior. On the other hand, social age refers to the social conduct and the roles of the individual relative to their groups or society. An individual's social age is related to his or her chronological, biological, and the psychological ages, but it is not completely defined by these. With the shift in the population, it requires the health professionals to acquire more of the cultural competency and that the social policy adapt to more health professionals from the weaker section of the society. With increasing age, various underlying physiological changes occur and the risk of the chronic diseases rises, and by the age of 60 years and above, the major burden of the disability and death arises from the age-related losses. The changing social patterns often affect the life of the elderly in a negative way. The physical processes, which is aging, disease, and disability, overlap with each other and with the social processes, which is often referred to as growing old. There is an increasing concern for the welfare of the elderly people as the life expectancy of the population has increased along with the increased dependency rate due to disability and the disease. With the changing society and lifestyle, there is a need to implement the training programs for health professionals in the belief of different culture and the impact of the interaction between older people and their healthcare providers should be tackled towards the healthier and the successful aging. Thank you.